Welcome to the Growth and Banter podcast. My name is Blake Micola, CEO and founder of GMS Media Group, one of Australia's leading creative digital advertising agencies. This podcast is for anyone looking to learn the insights and strategies from industry leaders and the highs and lows of leading a successful life. Today, we're joined by David Flakelar, and he's going to teach you the strategies to harness your inner performance to excel in your business and in life. Hope you enjoy. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Blake.
So we've had the pleasure of, getting to know each other over the past, what's it been, 6 months, both professionally and personally. And I'd love to, just start off by just getting your insight on, number one, what inner performance is, and two, what led you here today in your life to practice what you preach and to do the things you're doing today.
Cool. Well, inner performance adds to the training paradigm. Most people are familiar with hard skills. That's like technical skills, whether you're a dentist or a lawyer or a tradie. And then there's soft skills. People are familiar with that term, which is learning to communicate, have EQ, and be able to relate to people. But what inner performance adds to this equation is inner skills. In other words, how are we when we turn up to execute our technical training? Or how are we before we actually talk to people in terms of people skills? And so we specialize in that realm of learning how you are, your attitude, how you are emotionally, how you are with your stress. Are you nice and grounded? Are you calm and focused? And this sort of has wide-ranging applications for many contexts, business, personal, and of course our health-related issues. How I got here was an interesting story from my perspective. Yeah. I didn't start off in the health realm. I followed my father's footsteps as a land surveyor developer, and that played to my strengths from school, science and maths. And I loved it, and I thrived in it, and I went to uni, became registered, did all sorts of crazy jobs in my career. Was flown in helicopters out to the Northwest Shelf, setting out offshore drilling and blasting, worked in the desert in WA, set out high-rise buildings, all sorts of weird and wonderful things. I loved it. But something happened probably in my mid-30s that changed my direction. I think for a lot of us, when we hit hard times, we reflect on what we're about, what's important. And for me, I hit a milestone with a relationship, and I thought, if I don't really start to look at myself and improve, if I lose this relationship because I don't own anything, I could really beat myself up for the rest of my life. So that sort of started a whole journey of personal development to take responsibility for my part of the relationship. And if in the end, if it didn't survive, and at least I did my best, I can live with it. So in my mid-30s, I really went into personal development. I really looked at everything I could possibly do to improve myself. Yeah. I became a workshop junkie. I did anger workshops, healing workshops, you name it. I did, the whole range. And I actually really loved the idea of improving who we are and becoming more of who we can be. And that sort of led me to looking at really moving into health and away from science, more into medical health. And I just fell in love with personal development. And then, I got qualified into different modalities, and I went from full-time surveying to part-time. And I just transitioned over, and that was like 20 odd years ago. Wow. And 20,000 people later of treatments and doing facilitations and workshops and trainings, I find myself in a completely different area of work than I started my career. But I'm glad I did. It hasn't been easy. Nothing is, but it's been really, really fulfilling. And I'm glad I sort of followed my heart and followed my instinct.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you did as well, because I think the skills you have is phenomenal, and I think something that people probably don't realise the importance of. But I had a similar journey of being involved and exposed to events and coaching style of programs, both within a personal development setting and business and, property investment, when I was working at a coaching event company and I was the marketing manager there. So I got exposed to it from a young age, which is I can completely relate how you've sort of gone through that process. And, I value personal development myself. And I think it's important for any high-performing person, whether they're in a high-performance role or whether they're in a high-performing company or whether they're an athlete, that they should be, utilizing the ability to harness their inner performance. And I think for those out there that don't know the difference between, what you do versus an ordinary life coach, what are the main differences between your methodologies and practices, from an inner performance point of view and performance, maximizing your performance in life versus, say, just an ordinary life coach? And there's plenty of coaches out there these days.
Yeah, there's a coach for just about everything.
Right.
And look, coaching is a really, really great thing to have. I've had coaching, I've learnt coaching in my training. Coaching is really simply helping people find the answers to the problems that they already know, or at least finding the action plans to go and find help that they need. And that's a really valid process. I do some coaching, but primarily in my traditional 20 years of one-on-one, it's more about treating people's energetic physiology and anatomy, which means it's a big science to talk about. But primarily I treat people for health-related injuries, whether it's physical problems, emotional traumas, or mental health issues. And so that part of my business, which I call personal, people come for a huge range of different ailments, and I use energetic skills to be able to bring about healing for them. And the principle is the energetic nature of our bodies governs the physical body and our emotional body and our mental body. So the energy to our body is like water to a plant. Needs to be healthy and free-flowing. Then the plant thrives. And for us, if our energy, our emotions, our mind's healthy, that fires up our biological systems. They can thrive, our muscles thrive. So it's a simple example would be if we worry a lot, we can feel sick. And if we keep worrying, it'll throw our digestion out. And we can get stomach ulcers. We can throw up. People at the start of a grand final, they'll be throwing up and so forth. So there's a very established connection between mind, emotions, and body. And so I help people untangle in a personal session what it is in their mental, emotional history that's leading to their problems with their health outcomes. And so how I started to apply it to business, that I had some business people say, look, we struggle with stress. Can you help us with stress? And I said, look, no problem. And that was quite a while ago. So I started to apply my teaching and my understanding to how I can help people in a business context. And so I developed stress management programs from there that went really, really well. And similarly, I had some athletes come to me for health-related injuries and wanted help how they could apply and get help with stress in sports context. So some of my clients are, Maddie Levy from the Paralympic team, Owen Wright, and different sports athletes. So it sort of happened by default that I sort of added sports and corporate training to a base of very strong energy medicine applications and history. As I said, I've treated 20,000 people. So that's how different it is. It's quite broad depending on the context, whereas it's the applications of energy medicine is really the new medicine, and it's been talked about in many different forums across the board. Now people understand that the energy that we derive from our mind and our emotions and our thoughts have direct impact into our biological systems, in our well-being from our mental health perspective. And the energy is critical to sports performance and any high-level achieving, because it actually governs not only strength and flexibility, but the quality of our thoughts, the quality of our mind, the quality of our relationships. So it's quite, interactive and applicable to so many areas. And that's a long answer, I know, but it's a very different comparison to just looking at a coaching element to what we do in inner performance.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. There's the holistic approach that you provide versus maybe just focusing on one niche of life.
That's right.
Yeah, and you came in and did a workshop with my team, and that was great to get my team sort of across how the part of the session was around putting yourself in a bit of a meditative state and doing breathing exercises when dealing with tough situations. With us, it's about dealing with potentially a campaign that's not performing, or a tough client, or anything external to their work that could be impacting in the office. So that was amazing just for you to come in and do that. What the one thing that I always get interested by is the difference, but also the commonalities between high performing sports athletes, like you mentioned, you're working with Owen Wright, and business professionals. So you obviously working across those two fields. What are the main common threads and or differences between the two when you sort of break it down?
Yeah, in any sort of endeavour, particularly in business or sport, there's always pressure. There's pressure to perform. There's pressure to meet deadlines. There's, the fears of screwing things up. There's the fear of failing. All those things bear down on individuals. The problem is that most of us don't have any training in learning how to manage that stress, managing the fear. And we can't just overlay a positive attitude on everything and think that's going to resolve it, because we're emotional beings as well as mental beings. So the key for both business and for sport to do well at a high level is learning how to manage that stress so that the stress is not managing you. So it's normal to have fear, it's normal to have nerves, it's normal to be able to deal with those pressures in an acute situation, but we need the skills to manage it. And so both parties, we teach how to stay really calm in your body, how to stay focused, and how to tap into those high performance attributes of courage and wisdom, and to make those good decisions in the moment. So there's a lot of qualities that we can tap into ourselves and manage the stress if we have the keys and the skills to be able to do it.
Yeah, and you mentioned athletes are highly competitive by trait from a young age, and perhaps a business person might not have that attribute. In fact, sometimes it's quite the opposite. They want to collaborate and share their secrets with other people, and that's a lot of what we do in business is sharing and collaborating and uncovering everything. So there's a lot of transparency. But I like how when we were talking earlier, the fact that sporting professionals will have their methodology and keep it to themselves because they're so competitive.
That's right.
So it's funny because we're talking about Owen Wright with David also, my business sort of M&A coach, and we're working with him at the moment, working on some sort of big projects with our agency. And you guys have a lot of similarities, and we're talking about Owen Wright and his upbringing and the discipline that he has, and how that's related to him sort of going into that Olympic contention and winning bronze, and the trauma he had through that process. I'm reading the book at the moment, and so was David Sawicki, which was quite funny. But talk me through that story, because I think that's a really cool one. Someone on that level using someone like yourself.
Well, it was very organic. Owen lives close to where I lived up at Lennox Head, and we were surfing one day, and this was just before Owen got back into the WSL. And I said to him, just, when he was surfing, I said, "You look like you're surfing pretty well, oh." And he goes, "No, there's something not right." And I go, "What is it?" And he was talking about some of the symptoms he was having. And in my mind, I understood what they were. There was an energetic issue that he was having trouble with. And he'd been to all the traditional neurologists and physiologists and brain scheduling, and they did a great job to get him back to where he was. But what had happened was that he experienced trauma. And when you experience trauma as an athlete or as a person in everyday life, it does damage your energetic system. And so we discussed it over a coffee, and I gave him a session and basically resolved that energetic influence that was imbalancing him in his sport, because he was struggling, feeling really in his body again. And obviously a surfer needs to be very in his body and grounded. And so after that first treatment, he was amazed the difference. And so we worked at, strengthening up his energetic system. And then the rest is history. He went on to, I think he placed well in a Newcastle comp, and then he went on to win the Snapper comp.
Yeah.
And but the funny thing with sports people, they are very disciplined.
Yes.
So they apply the homework and what you do with them, and they're great to work with. Yeah. Whereas corporate people, a different animal. Yeah. They don't have the same competitive disciplines that sports people have.
And they might neglect their health as well in the process a little bit more.
Yeah, they're not quite as health conscious. So anyway, working with Owen was just a pleasure, and he's a lovely guy, and it was awesome to be able to help him contribute to his success, as well as everyone else that's added to him. And the other sports people I've worked with are similar. Matt Levy, from the Australian Paralympic team.
That's a phenomenal story.
He's an amazing human being, and he came to me with a similar thing. He wanted some things twigging, and at that high level of Olympic elite sports, they're looking for the 2 to 5%, and often it can be found in their inner performance, because they're already getting the nutrition, the training, the physical work, the techniques, but lack sometimes that ability to really be in that performance zone, to really be in that ability to have that 2 to 5% improvements. And again, Matt was just awesome to work with. He did what the homework that I set for him. He applied the work, and he got the results. And it was he came to me, because it's public knowledge. He came to me for faster getting off the block times. If you don't know who Matt Levy is, he's a swimmer. He's been an Australian Paralympian for 5 games. He's won gold medal for Australia. So he's operating at a high level. And for Matt, wanted to get faster block times, and to be able to have more awareness of his technique in the pool, so he can make those slight technical changes. And to do that, you've got to have a lot of body awareness. And so, we worked on those 2 factors, and we applied the inner performance skills, and he actually did really well. He got, after a series of work, he got 2 personal best times, qualified. And I think the last race he did, he won gold for Australia in the 50-metre relay. I might have that wrong, Matt. Sorry, but it was something like that. And he retired, at the top of his game. And that competitive instinct and that competitive discipline is, from my perspective, wonderful qualities to have in a client, so that they actually do what you want them to do. And they get the results.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned that as well. It's like it's one thing knowing that something is quite imbalanced with your life, or maybe you're stuck in a cycle. Maybe you don't know how to break out of that. But I think the thing that people neglect the most, which you've mentioned, is putting that realization and consciousness into practice, and actually going through and doing the work. I think a lot of people miss out on that step. It's one thing sort of manifesting or realizing you're in a situation that you need to get out of, but going and actually putting your hand up or seeking some different ways to get out of that situation. A lot of people don't realize that it's hard work to get through it.
That's right. Look, personal development is incredibly rewarding, whether it's improvement for sport or improvement for business, but it does come down to you. And so, we talked often, and people mention it, that failure is a good thing, and it is. But that's only part of it. It's only a good thing if you learn from it, and you can therefore grow accordingly. A lot of people acknowledge their failures, but they don't either have the interest, the fear stops them, or the knowledge or access to what to then do the next step, which is to actually make changes.
Yes.
You know, we all screw up. We all, aren't perfect, and that's okay. But to know what to do to make those changes sometimes, can be difficult for people.
Yeah.
And so I think, identifying what's missing in your particular world is really critical, whether it's your attitude or your emotional stress or managing how you talk to people, whatever it is. I think learning from that and getting the right support, whether it's in a performance or a psychologist or a trainer, I think, that's what's key to failing forward, is to then learn by it so you can grow. And, that follow through right to the end where you've actually mastered a new set of skills and then applying it in your business or applying it in your personal life. That's sort of what I've seen really key for the people who have done extremely well under my watch, is the people that really apply it and make the changes and are willing to. People aren't willing to change sometimes, and to their detriment, unfortunately.
And look, there's some we've all got something going on. No one's perfect. There's no such thing as perfectionism. There's also, a well-known term of Australians having this tall poppy syndrome mentality, which I think makes it quite hard for people to get the support, I feel, whether it is them excelling in certain areas of their life. Yeah. So that naturally then has an impact on mental health in Australia too. Yes. And I would say, and I know you've got some stats, but we would probably have a high per capita mental health state compared to the rest of the world due to that. And I don't know where that stems from. So it's a bit of a funny one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, looking at mental health research, sometimes we say, oh, look, it's not my problem. It's out there, but it doesn't affect me or my teams. But it's actually quite sobering when you look at the research, what it says. There's almost 50% of the population is going to have a mental health injury in their lifetime. Yeah, well. That means everyone you talk to, it's either you or them statistically.
It's one of us.
Yeah, one of us. This is like, I think it's 1 in 6 people suffer depression in Australia, 1 in 3 anxiety. Yeah. There's 3,000 people suiciding a year, 65,000 attempted suicide.
Wow.
How many millions of people think about suicide? Yeah. So it's a real problem, and it's coming at you. It's like, it's not maybe, it's there in the research. So everyone's standing on a train track, and a train's coming called mental health, and you need to be aware of it, and you need to take action to be able to get off the train track before it hits you, or it hits a friend or a family member. And that's a real why I do what I do, because I've seen so many people suffer adversely, unnecessary from mental health causes, whether it ends up being in hospital, or they have a disease, or they have problems in their stress-related, or they lose their marriages because they can't manage their emotions or their communication, or they haven't resolved the issues that from their traumatized childhood. And these are all great people that could have successful lives. And unfortunately, if we don't take responsibility and learn mental health skills, strategies, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's the key attributes of physical exercise, good diet, all those things, we can suffer adversely. And if it affects you or your family, it really can be debilitating and take you out of business or take you out of a relationship unnecessarily. Yeah. One of my clients that I worked with was a senior executive for one of the major banks, and she had a breast cancer, and she said to the oncologist, "How long do you think this has been there?" And he said about 6 months. And we were talking about it, and she said, "Well, 6 months before that, I got a new boss, and I was driven into the ground. I worked 6 days a week, 14 hours a day, high stress." Now, there's a lot of correlation between stress levels and immune system and health in your body. But she was convinced that that was the thing that changed.
So you don't necessarily need to just be having a bad diet or poisoning your body. It's this sort of other area that people aren't realising that's impacting
the mental
their nervous
health
system.
stress. There's, I think Harvard says that 90% of illness is stress related.
Wow.
So with this particular client, she felt very guilty having time off to get the treatment, and so she went back and worked even harder, and didn't learn the lesson. And so she had breast cancer in the second breast, and they'd had both taken off and had metastasized. And so she was in a very, very critical care situation, and she was seeking some understanding, what in the hell's going on, like what has gone on here. And once I explained the correlation, she said, please make sure that you take what you do into the corporate world so that people don't have to die for their job.
Wow.
And that still rings a loud toll bell in my head, to be able to take this work so people have a choice. And it's a win-win for both business and for the employees to be able to better manage their stress levels so they're happier, they're more productive. And so it's a good news story. It's just that people need to understand it and put some time and resources into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't neglect the mind just as much as you can't neglect the body from a physical point of view. But in terms of like everyone, the 20,000 people that you've you've treated or consulted, what do you feel is the common thread or the common problems that they face before coming to see you? What is the most common?
A lot of it is feeling burnout, anxiety, and a lot of that comes from just this inability to manage stress, and stress could be broken down into a range of different causes. The fundamental cause is emotional stress that they are unable to manage properly, and this gets absorbed into the body, and it's referred to as allostatic load in medical terms, but for most of us, it's just accumulates and accumulates and accumulates, and even high achievers that were guns for a few years, if they don't manage their stress and keep things in balance, all of a sudden now they've got anxiety disorders, and now they've got panic attacks, and now they're on stress leave, and so they break down. And so that inability to manage our mind and manage our stress at a high level is really wide screen across a lot of population.
Yeah.
And we do well when everything's going pretty well. Our body's very resistant and resilient, but it's when we have these real bookmarks in our life that turn our lives upside down, like our best friend dies, or we split up from a relationship, or we go bankrupt, or we have these major bookmarks. They can send people into a spiral that they don't recover.
Yeah.
And so often I see those people. But for the vast majority of people, it's that sort of high achiever burnout that gets neglected, that now they've got, it's affecting their performance, it's affecting their mind, it's affecting their emotions through anxiety, it's affecting their relationships with their kids or with their partner, and they know they've got, a pattern that plays out in their life. All those sort of things come to the table, and that's often the origins.
So for anyone listening who, they might not have had the tools or resources to practice anything like this in a performance setting, or they haven't been able to break through any mind blockages, what would you recommend or suggest that the easy first steps to take if they haven't really put anything into practice?
Well, if the first thing to do is to start to learn attention regulation, which is really the principal key to mindfulness practice. And that means simply learning to put your attention on your body or your breath, as opposed to just being in your head all the time, thinking about all your problems and so forth. So
Which sometimes happens when you're trying to sleep. Then it's like, bang.
Yeah,
all
you
this stuff
can't
goes
turn it
through.
off.
Yeah, you can't turn it off.
Yeah, because attention is like petrol. So the more attention you put in your mind and your problems, the faster it is and the more intense it goes. So a lot of mindfulness practices are learning to regulate that attention. And so instead of being in your mind, you learn to put it in your breath. And the breath is used across the board universally as a tool to direct the attention away from the mind into the body, where all of a sudden that petrol is switched off and the mind can start to slow down and we can be more present. So that's probably the really of the ABCD of learning how to start to manage your mind, start to direct the attention into your breath, into your body. So people could start to do yoga, they could start to go to some mindfulness training, they could come and see me, of course. We do it more intensively. But wherever you are, whatever you're doing, just learning to sit and just be aware of your breath. Be aware of the sun on your face. Be aware of the breeze. Just be aware of how your body feels. Anything to just start to be still and feel the senses is a really incredibly simple but very effective way of starting to rebalance your mind and your body.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's just about connecting with yourself, right? Some people are so just out of touch with their consciousness.
Yeah, they're just in automatic running from meeting to meeting, from problem solving to another solving, to going from problems at work to problems at home. They don't get to stop. They don't get to be present with who they are.
And I think the self-awareness, I think I see a lot of people just not having that, that self-awareness. They're just sort of in their own little world and they're not understanding the energy around them, or themselves.
And you see it all the time where when people, try to technically do the right thing at a workplace. Okay, so I'm going to talk to them about this. I'm going to, bring up these subjects and so forth, but they're not aware of how they are coming to the meeting. Yeah, so if you're coming to a meeting and you're very stressed, people feel that.
Oh, yeah.
We're energetic beings, and that's not woo-woo. No. Everyone knows this because you walk into a room, you can feel it. It doesn't matter what it looks like. You get a sense of feel.
Yeah.
And so how we are when we're doing what we're doing is just as important as what we're doing.
Yeah.
And when you bring a really relaxed, kind, open, compassionate energy to your meetings, to your relationships, it disengages a lot of that defensive energy that was there before. And we all feel that. Like when someone comes into a room and they're kind and they're calm and they say, how are you going? What's going on for you? And let's talk about this. All of a sudden, you're much more feeling more comfortable. You're more likely to be able to be more collaborative.
Yeah.
And so it sounds very simple, but it's sort of been left out of our training.
Yeah.
And it's been left out of our education.
It's true. And it's maybe they should teach that more at school, because I feel it's complete negligence to not understand that there is energy both in a positive and negative way, which is literally made up of the universe. And we're a product of that.
Yeah.
For us to not understand how we work in similar ways to how the universe works, I think a lot of people just don't even understand that, or they think it's, woo-woo, or like, oh, it's too overwhelming, I don't want to know about it sort of thing. But, when you do start breaking it down of why we're here, how we're made of, and what the universe is made from, it's literally hand in hand how we operate as humans.
Absolutely. And when you look at the energetic system, it's just physics.
It is.
Because you have fields of energy that then break down to affect meridian systems that transport energy to biological systems. That's on a health-related program. But when it comes to relationships and business, I've worked with real estate agents and they've all changed and become much more successful, the private ones, because really when they enter a room, and this is typical for any sort of salesy meeting or business meeting, it's if you get a bunch of people that are all in competition to win a client, they all technically, roughly, may offer the same sort of skills and the same sort of service. But the one that wins the client is the one that the client feels that they can trust, feel that they connect with. And if you remove the personalities and just go on that energy,
game.
It's the person that has the energy that they feel comfortable with. And that energy is someone that is really calm and grounded and that has a really good open-hearted energy. I don't mean kissy energy. I mean they've just got a lovely soft energy that they relate to. We all relate to those people. And these are the ones that is successful in business because people want to do business with people that make them feel good.
Yeah.
You know, all the people that you know that you work well with, either your favourite clients or your friends, they're the people that make you feel good, and they make you feel good because their hearts are open and they have this positive energy. And so we can learn to tap into that, whether it's for sales or whether it's for training purposes in our group. This idea of being able to lift your energy to bring that about at will every time is what we teach. Yeah. And it's so important, and it has such a very measurable outcome for your health. It has a measurable outcome for your business outcomes, because we all know we want to work with those people.
Yeah.
And I've seen it in real estate. People get more appraisals that have the right energy. You know, where they're not chasing the dollar, they're actually coming from an authentic service-based energy, and people smell that from 100 miles away.
This is how I've built the agency, on that exact thinking and that exact philosophy of a no dickhead policy, you know, and they do sometimes slip through the cracks because you can, maybe see people that are putting on a facade and then it starts to break down over time. But, I consult with every new business that wants to work with us, and we don't have a huge churn and burn model because we've got great retention with our clientele. So it's important for us to qualify that right business because we're working with them month in, month out. It's not just a one transaction, it's a monthly transaction. And we've got some clients that have been with us from day one, literally 7-8 years.
Yeah.
So it's super important for me as the business to ensure that we've got certain systems and processes in place to qualify the right brand. Because if I'm just bringing everybody in, then that becomes a churn and burn model. Then I'm going to have high churn in clients, have high churn in staff because they're not going to want to work there and work for those clients, and it's not going to be fun.
That's right.
You know, I would probably want to. Well, I wouldn't even want to be there in my own business if that was the case.
Yeah.
But sometimes you do have to go through that sacrifice when growing. But that's the energy thing, right? It's understanding the no dickhead policy. If you're going to be stuck with that person in business, then and from a staff and recruitment point of view, that's the same thing. You know, I look for attitude and culture over skills.
Yes,
you can teach skills. You can't. Sometimes the attitude and the culture
is harder.
It's too long. It takes too long to train, and sometimes it is untrainable. Yeah. I know that with your practices, you definitely can break down that sort of breakthrough in attitude, but that's not my job to do that. That's sort of hiring. So that's what we look for in that order. But yeah, talk us through what the performance zone is.
The performance zone is something that I really discovered working with sports people. It's not a psychological key. You know, while psychology and sports psychology and having the right attitude, they're all valid inputs into the equation. But the missing part of it in the performance zone is it's actually an energetic key. And what I mean by that is that you need to be robustly in your body grounded so you've got supreme control over your body. In other words, if you think, arm move, and then the arm's too slow, you're not going to get that instant being in sync with your body and being super strong and balanced. So that's the really A part of the first little knob of the key. The second knob of the key is having mastered your emotions so that you are really calm and super present moment focused. Because when you're super present moment focused, what happens is that it's a bit like before, if you're not focused, you're like in the old dial-up download. It's all very slow. But when you're super focused, you're in this high definition. It's a bit like Limitless.
Yeah.
Right. You know, all of a sudden he's aware of 1,000 things.
Amazing movie.
So he's in high definition. That's what happens when you go into super present moment. And then the third rung of the key is being able to access the high performance virtues. And that's very difficult to do because you can't do it from your mind. You've got to do it from an internal access into the heart virtues, which gives you courage and wisdom and trust, to name a few. So to face difficult sporting outcomes or business outcomes, you need courage. Otherwise, the fear overwhelms you. So when you combine being super grounded, super focused, and with the high performance virtues of the heart, then all of a sudden, bingo, you enter a completely different zone. It's like taking NZT.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, what was a challenge, now you're just 3 steps over it. It's that zone
Like you're watching
where
things in slow motion.
Yeah, and to give the viewers or people at home an understanding, we've all experienced this, and I'll give you some examples. If anyone's ever been in a car accident, right, it's like, oh my God, time just slows down.
So true.
Right? Or if you were riding a bike as a kid and you went off a ramp and you knew you were going to fall, it seems forever to hit the ground. Or in my life, when I've gone to Indonesia and pulled into a really big barrel,
Slows down.
and you're really deep in it, and the whole thing just feels like time slows down.
Yeah.
Surfers would know this, and you think you've been in there for 30 seconds, but it's been 3 seconds of intensity. What the common thing is that you go into super present moment time because of the intensity you're forced to.
Yeah.
But when you do that, all of a sudden you enter a different zone. And so your relationship to time changes. Now, time obviously doesn't change, but your relationship to time changes.
Oh, yeah.
So you enter a different zone. Now, we can apply that. We can learn to enter that. And when you do, there's great advantages. For example, working with the Australian women's baseball team, when they were batting, right, and they were entering into that performance zone, they said the fast balls were slowing down. They could see the seams and they were freaking out. They're going, what's happening? And then I explained the physics of it and they went, oh my God, that's so cool. So then they can adjust their swing depending on how the ball was shaped. And conversely, they could do the opposite when they were going to Japan. The struggle is in Australia, they usually find the pitches are all fast balls. But when they go to Japan, they were very slow, curvy balls, but they were so used to fast balls that they had difficulty slowing their body down. So they used one of the techniques to enter the zone, and then they could wait and be the observer and be able to counter that slow ball. So it's across our lives. This is not something I've just dreamed up. This is something that I've realised that I can help people enter the zone. And the applications for sport are obvious. And for business, it's really important because it allows you to understand the person better by having that present moment listening skill, or by noticing they get uncomfortable when they talk about a subject, which may be an introduction for you to help them with that subject, or whatever it is in business that you need to relate to. When you're a better listener, when you're better focused, when you're in a much more collaborative energy, it all works in your advantage. And it's not manipulation. It's just that you're being a better provider of your service.
Yeah. And I think, like, further to that as well, I think there's a big difference between being motivated and being disciplined. Motivation, you're not always going to have motivation. There's going to be times you don't want to get out of bed.
That's right.
Everybody says it from a high performance point of view, whether they're waking up early to go to the gym or waking up early to go for a surf. The wake up's tough, but once you're out there, you're like, that was worth it. So the motivation's not necessarily always with you every day. Every week and every year, you're going to have times of low motivation, and you always hear people going, I'm just not motivated this week.
Yeah.
Versus discipline, if you've got those principles in place, you're going to do it regardless because you're working towards an outcome, and you know that doing that is serving you a purpose in life. But what do you feel, because consistency is very hard in life, and I feel that's been one of my struggles over time as well. You know, I'm very on and off, and you know, I think that finding that balance now in my 30s has, you know, I'm starting to sort of practice more of a sustainable life and strike that balance, particularly when I'm leveling up in business and all that sort of stuff. But what do you feel people trip up on the most when trying to be consistent and?
Well, I think the obvious things that most people talk about is like have a system and a routine, so that that helps you be consistent, and that's fairly universally accepted. You know, go to the gym at 7. You know, schedule it. If it's not in your diary, it doesn't happen. So I think that's a real given. I think the why, most people understand that's an important thing. Like, why do you want to take those vitamins?
Yeah.
Why do you want to exercise? So having a strong why is a given, which is your purpose. And here's the cruncher. The thing that disables most people in being consistent is when they emotionally slip and they go downhill. Because when we're happy, we're able to do everything, and it's like, yes, let's go to the gym. Yeah. Yes, let's do that. But when we get stressed, when we get wounded, when whatever it is, that's when we tend to go, oh, look, I couldn't be bothered today. Yeah. Or, you know, you pick up the bad habits. You just don't give a shit. You sort of start to slip across the board.
And that momentum just builds like a snowball.
So it's important to be able to do two things with that subject. It's important not to beat yourself up if you're emotionally slipping, because, you know, we're emotional human beings. You know, it's okay to feel disappointed that you didn't meet your target, or, you know, sometimes we do get hurt by our partners or our friends. It's normal. But what's important, and this is where I try to teach people to be, you know, proactive, is that instead of reacting to the emotional stress and let it take, as you say, it snowballs, learn to be proactive and manage it. So it's okay that I feel angry, stressed, tired, shitty, but let me manage it with specific ways, specific energetic techniques, meditations, so that I change that energy, I change that emotional weakness back to a neutral, calm, positive space. And then, great, and all of a sudden you're back on. So I think that's the key. When people get emotionally stressed and wounded, their minds reflects that in their attitude, and they just don't have that sort of discipline to stay consistent. So I think learning those self-management skills, I find personally, is critical, because if I'm in a shitty attitude and I'm not doing my routines that I know I really want to do, it's because something's going on internally.
Yeah.
And I've got the skills to self-manage that. So then I come back into a good zone and I'm in a good mood, and then all of a sudden, bang, okay, yeah, let's do that thing. Whereas before, you go, I couldn't be bothered. I just couldn't be bothered. Yeah. That sort of attitude. Yeah. So I think that's key, emotional management.
And I know that we've touched on this a few times already with, like, you know, the certain little practices or steps people can take, but what are the main, I guess, takeaways or keys, like you said, particularly in today's world of comparison on social media and online?
Yep.
You know, looking at the highlights of everyone's life, the indulgence of, you know, the ability to be able to get over whatever we want, and the immediate gratification of today's world, and that's only going to get worse. And there's going to be times with technology that the click of a finger, we can almost get anything we want. So it's creating this sort of, I don't know, almost like a serotonin boost every time we want something. It's there, and you know, AI is gonna, you know, it's gonna be crazy what AI is gonna do to us over time as well.
Yeah.
So I guess with that in mind, in today's world, and it potentially only going to get worse with distractions and shiny objects for us to get carried away, what are the main takeaways and keys there for people at home?
Well, I think you need to understand that we've got a physiology that's millions of years old. Just because technology's come along the last 20 years or 30 years doesn't mean the things that we need for our physiology to be healthy are thrown out just because they're not cool anymore. So I think those fundamentals that keep our mind and emotions and body healthy are always going to be there. Being able to slow down, being able to connect to yourself and manage your internal self so that you're happy from the inside or feeling good from the inside out is really always going to be fundamental. In other words, if we look for external shiny objects or gratification to make us feel good, then that's never ending. And so we'll be always searching for this never ending feel good, what's the next fix? And of course it's empty and not fulfilling, because the only way to be fulfilled and at peace, which is what you're alluding to, is to have a healthy relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
Even with our faults and our shortcomings, it's really important to be able to have that healthy relationship and to be able to derive that sense of peace within ourselves, because then you don't need that shiny outside thing to make yourself feel good. I don't need to have 5 houses.
You're not filling
I
those
don't
gaps.
need to have the perfect body. I don't need that. Whilst some of these things are really cream on the cake is you.
Yeah.
And that's the illusion. And of course, the commercial people selling all the other things are trying to get you to go, no, this is what's going to make you happy, but it's not true. What's going to make you sustained and healthy is understanding that you're the cake. You're really key, your relationship to yourself. And I don't mean in a narcissistic, oh, fuck, I'm beautiful, look at me, and oh, God, I've got the best body.
Way, yeah.
No, I mean in, hey, I'm a good person and I've got value and I know that my values and I share them, and I actually I forgive myself for my shortcomings, and I learn to appreciate aspects of my body that allow me to walk around. People don't appreciate their bodies.
Yeah.
They just don't, like some of these fundamental things. So I think that's sort of a big, topic. But I think fundamentally, Blake, to answer your question, is having a really loving, healthy relationship with yourself is really key, because then all those other things become the cream. Not the other way around.
It's a bonus, yeah.
And then I think we don't suffer that sense of unfulfillment and, oh, I won't be happy until I achieve that first house I paid off. And then you get there and you go, oh no, it's until I achieve that second house, or it'll be when I have the marriage and the 3.5. They're all external delusions that when we get there, it doesn't satisfy us. Yeah. I treated this guy once who came to me and he was depressed, and this is a great example. And I said, well, what can I help you with? He said, oh, well, I've worked really, really hard all my life. I own properties all around the world. I own yachts. I'm, worth, $100 million. But I've retired thinking that I'd be happy, and I'm just miserable, and I want some help. And I said, oh, well, that's easy. And he goes, how could it be easy? I've been to all these different things. I said, it's really easy because you're trying to find happiness outside of yourself. The boats and the houses don't mean anything. Happiness is something that you find within, and then that flows through your life. It flows to your friends. It flows to your clients or your love at home and people that you love in your life. Yeah. And if you make your life about you, then you're free and you're empowered to make changes and be free of the attachments of the outside world that will, in a disillusioned way, have you chasing something that will never fulfill you. Yeah. Which doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with having goals of success and goals outside of you, but it should be a secondary or tertiary priority. The first priority should always be finding peace within yourself. And I know that's a little bit Buddhist and so forth, but a lot of these spiritual traditions last the test of time because it's true. Yeah. And in my world, helping people come to peace with themselves, which may be coming to peace with their childhood, how they look, whatever it is really fundamental. Yeah, and I think there's nothing wrong with having nice things and having material objects, so long as it's not all about that, and so long as you're thinking that that's going to provide you happiness. You can
and I think money doesn't make you happy, but also not having money probably doesn't make you happy either. So you sort of do need it in some capacity. It's like striking that balance, and it becomes a distraction. Like buying new things and having a fresh pair of sneakers on, you don't want to get dirty, or having a new car that you're worrying about all the time, or having all these clothes that you're stressing about that are going to get dirty or whatever when you're out. It's that it does become a distraction the more material things you have, which is why people like Elon Musk, and he's on a completely black and white other side of the spectrum. He's a minimalist because he doesn't want things to distract him in his purpose in life, and he's doing some crazy stuff right now. Like, can't really relate, anyone to him, but it's just that finding that balance of don't overindulge, don't chase material objects too much, and find happiness in yourself. I think that's a good lesson.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to go and see some help. Start the journey. All the most successful people that are in my orbit are people that have been on the personal development journey for years. And it doesn't mean that they're crazy. I mean, the human mind's a bit crazy, if you ask me. So it's people that go, I recognise I need these skills in order to stay high performance and healthy. And once you have that training and you have those skills, life becomes so much easier. Because when those external things, fall over, when you don't get the appraisal, or you don't get that contract, or if your partner speaks to you unkindly, or you lose them, or something dramatic happens, you don't collapse into 1,000 pieces because you've developed this cake, or this sense of relationship in yourself that you can trust, that's very robust, and it stands up. I've been through a lot of traumas and difficulties in my life, and people say, oh, you must have it all together. And I think about it and I go, no, I'm still a vulnerable human being.
Yeah.
I'm still vulnerable to a loss. I'm still vulnerable to these things. But the big difference is I've learned how to manage it, not from a psychological process alone, but from an internal way, learning to be able to transcend the emotional traumas and come back to a valued, healthy relationship of self. And I think that is just so key for many people across the board. Then you can take it into high levels of life without the fear of losing that. People, have that fear, if I build up that business, then I'm going to be in fear of losing it. Well, if we have that idea, then we're in a slight set of trauma with everything. I'm afraid of falling in love with that person because I might lose them, or I'm afraid of building up that business because I might lose it, or whatever it is. And I think that's the underpinning of a lot of people's anxiety. Not having that really safe, comfortable place in themselves to feel secure, irrespective of what happens to ourselves in our life.
Yeah, I think it's funny what you said there. It's like people can look at you and go, you've got your shit sorted, you're sweet, but everyone's human.
Exactly.
And all like we work with tons of, one of our main segments with, who we work with within my agency is a lot of coaches and consultants across different niches, but they're specialists and they're coaching other people. It doesn't mean that they don't need coaching as well.
That's exactly
and
right.
A lot of people say to me, oh, Blake's got his shit sorted, and it's like, well, there's a lot of challenges with running a business and, having to tell others what to do. And, sometimes I don't want to do that. Sometimes I want to be told what to do, So it's like, you don't know where people are at. And it's important at any level to develop support around you for sure.
Absolutely. Like I liked your previous speaker, David's idea of a SWAT team.
David Sawicki, I swear I bring this up at every podcast, but that's a phenomenal analogy.
And it's true. I'm part of many people's SWAT team.
Yeah.
And I've got my own SWAT team.
Yeah.
And I think it's just...
You're part of my SWAT team,
it's healthy.
That's right.
It makes sense.
It does.
Because when we don't have to have all the answers and we can't do everything ourselves.
No.
So you pick...
It's naive to think you can do it on your own.
And it's arrogant.
It is.
And so when you do have those critical care health professionals in your life, or coaches or whatever, it gives you a lot of security because you go, hey, if I fall over, if I'm going to have a bad time, I've got people that can support me.
Yeah.
And I think that's really part of having a healthy mental health strategy is to have those people in your team that can be there for you when you need it, so that you can take risks, so that you can push yourself without the fear of having to hold it all together.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's bang on. I think that's really, really wise.
Yeah. I've gone to, and I mentioned this again in another podcast. I've documented it. I've got like my agency support network, and there's like a good 80 different people in that SWAT team. Like there's a
Fantastic.
lot, right? Then I've got my own personal SWAT team.
Yes.
That can range from, legal to HR to personal training to yourself with, harnessing inner performance to, geez, there's so many others there I can't even think of. But it's like when you actually document it, that's when you know, okay, there's a lot of support around me.
And it's important. And I think, it brings to mind the problems from a lot of men in business, that they feel that if they acknowledge that they've got some mental health issues or some emotional traumas or things that are eating them up, that's somehow weak. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. If you're going to be successful in business or in life, like all warriors, you need to learn to take your armor off and attend to your wounds.
Yeah.
And then get back onto the field of life.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then they're going to rot and come out as bad, habits, whether it's drinking or drug taking or whatever it is. And so most of the people, unfortunately, I see, because I don't see enough men seeking help. It is starting to turn around.
Yeah, there's that mentality of like, she'll be right, particularly in Australia.
Yes.
But she won't be right because something's going to give.
Yeah, exactly. And it's actually, it's just dumb.
It is stupid.
There's too much science out there, and there's too much anecdotal evidence to show that when you get the right team together and that support, Richard Branson and all these great business people have their SWAT teams.
Oh,
and I mean,
huge
for those
amount.
people that think they've got to do it on their own, you don't. That's really
if anything, they're removing themselves in the equation, and their SWAT team's doing it for them.
That's right.
It's like,
So, women are much better at self-care.
Yep.
Women are much better at going inward. Women are naturally more sensitive to themselves. They're more collaborative. They're more able to, you see them at a lot of personal development workshops and so forth. But I would really, really invite and implore men to go, you deserve support.
Yeah.
You need support, and you're a human being like everyone else that does get wounded in the game of life. If you look at the sports analogy, we do get injured, and what happens? You go and get it fixed, and you take time out. You get external help.
Yeah.
And life's like that across the board.
Absolutely.
Particularly for our mental emotional health, because men have got their stresses, and they carry a lot of responsibility to provide and do their best. And men need as much help as women.
Yeah, and like you said, all it takes is one trauma in life to just derail you, to just get you stuck in a position that you can't get out of. Like I went through a shoulder operation, and for anyone out there who's had an operation like that, there's much bigger operations, but it cripples you for some time.
Yeah.
Your shoulder becomes completely immobile, and that made me really, go into a bit of a state of just not being able to get back to my normal self in health. I couldn't train, couldn't do the things I love, like surfing and golf and tennis, or even running. Like it probably took a good 2 years. And now I feel like I'm on the other end. I'm like, wow, like there was a huge amount of mental strength that had to get me through that to not just get stuck in that position. Because I think that happens, men get injured. They then, they might not be able to have the tools to get themselves out of that for proper rehab. And all it takes is one injury to completely derail you from a health point of view and a mental point of view. And you need your body working at its highest level, particularly when you're young. So, it's important not to neglect your physical body just as much as your mental body.
Yeah, and I think it's really part of your job. If your job's not just to technically be proficient and not to just sort of manage people, part of your job is turning up as a fit specimen, to be healthy, to be well slept, to have a good attitude. And I think more and more people are realising that, to be a successful entrepreneur means that you need to be super healthy.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're going to not cope with the hours, you're going to burn out, you're going to make poor decisions, et cetera, et cetera. And that'll spill into your personal life. And then, we know where that can lead. That's an additional. So I think all roads lead to Rome. Yeah. And that is to, I always say, what are the, people say, what's the key things I should do? Well, I call it the MENS program, which is it's just stands for meditation, exercise, nutrition, and good sleep. And the fifth one is having reciprocally positive, healthy, loving relationships, whether they're friends and or family. If the family relationships aren't healthy, it's important to put boundaries around them. And some people, they're friends of their family. Yeah. So,
and I think it's like tackling it head on as well. Like when I got the operation, they found that I've got a weak anatomy with my shoulder. I don't have a labrum at the missing part of my labrum at the top. Yep. For anyone who doesn't know what a labrum is, it's basically the socket that holds the joint in, right? Yep. So there's a gap there, which then you're predisposed for it popping out, and through football and sport. And I've had this mental block with the shoulder being injured since probably about 1920. Right. And then I remember the first time I popped it out, I had to go to hospital, and then I got the MRI, went to a surgeon. He's like, you got to get it done. I was just like, arrogance, nah, not doing it, it will fix itself. It happened again and again, and it wasn't until the sort of third or fourth time I was like, all right, it's basically 50% torn now. But there was a predisposition there I had no idea about until I went into the operation. And now I know what it is. I'm able to better manage it, and my life is so much better. Yes. Like as a result of that. Whereas before I was like always skating on thin ice. Like what happens, I just didn't have full confidence in my body. So I think, tackling things head on, whether it is physical or mental, before it starts eating you away too much, is super important.
Yeah, because we know, the things that we feared, really haunt us. Yeah. And, we attract the things that we fear the most, which is counterproductive. It doesn't make sense.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. And I think these days there's so much good help out there to help people, whether it's traditional or non-traditional alternative therapies, to be able to assist people.
That's right.
I think one of the best things that ever happened to me is really tweaking on to personal development and alternative therapy in my mid-30s, so I could, develop a better version of myself. Yeah. Instead of waiting till I was 60 when it's potentially not too late, but you've done the damage.
Yeah, 100%. So outside of business in your practices, what do you feel the biggest challenge has been for you?
I think, that's a really good question. I think self-doubt is always sort of an old wound that I had, and believing in myself.
That's a common one as well.
And the way, that used to stop me really dead in my tracks. But now I don't. I've done a lot of work on it and myself, obviously, because this is what I do. I can't take people into their own dark shadows if I haven't done it for myself. Yeah. But really, when that comes up, I know how to manage it. The self-doubt for anyone is a common thing, but learning to open up how to open up confidence and courage and belief in myself is something that's always there. I think with personal development, sometimes people think, I'll go into a month of personal development, I'll come out and I'll be perfect. It doesn't actually work like that. No. A lot of our injuries, mental health injuries from our childhood, can be, healed or resolved to such a level that it's not impacting your life. But it sits there as a little reminder every now and again. It gets triggered. And for you to then bring in your new tools to manage it so that you are managing that challenge instead of that's managing you. And I think that's something that I've been able to overcome, but it's there for me to keep myself conscious. It's like a guardrail that I need to be aware of, and I've overcome it largely through the internal work. And that's a challenge. But even though you see success and you see testimonies and you see results, there's that little thing that is in my past, and I think we all have that. But I think learning to manage it so it doesn't stop you is really is the key, and it's really what I've thankfully been able to overcome.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
What about on the flip side? What's your proudest moment or greatest success, do you feel, in what you do?
Wow. Look, there's many times where someone's come in a complete broken mess and walked out feeling at peace and happy in their lives. But I think generally my success, I think I feel quite at peace with myself as a person. I feel that all the work that I've done on myself, yes, I've shared professionally with people, and that's always a great professional feeling that you've done a great job because you've got outcomes, you've got resolved their pain or their physical or mental dysfunction. But when it comes back to me, irrespective of what I do achieve businessly or financially or I don't, I feel that I'm a much better person than I was when I started this journey. And I can feel at peace with that. And I think that's something that I'm really happy with. And I think that's something that is an important sort of attribute for most people, to find peace in themselves.
No, that's great. Well, I think in terms of, educating on people how to find peace, what do you feel, or what would you say is the one thing that people should stop doing, that is impacting them going to that next level or finding that inner performance? Like, what do you feel is the most common thing that people are, maybe doing that they should stop?
Probably the judging themselves is a real key. Judgment is so destructive because we're fallible, we're human beings, and we're not going to be perfect at everything. But if you go into an attitude of judgment, which is purely a function of the mind, then we're always making ourselves wrong. No matter how well we do, we say, well, I could have done that better, or I got 90% of my exam, I should have got 100, or
beating yourself up sort of mode.
Yeah, you've done really well to achieve that in your business. Oh, but I could have done, judgment.
I'm definitely at fault at that.
Judgment is just pure toxin. And people will then ask me, well, how do you live life without judgment? The key for that is learning how to remove the things that block your heart, because the heart takes you down a discerning path, which is a completely different set of outcomes for you. The discerning path is one where you still acknowledge what's right or what's wrong or what needs resolving, but you do it in a way that's positive, that's solution orientated, that's you have gratitude, you have a lot more constructive way of thinking, and that's traditionally spiritual hell and heaven. People on this planet can feel like they're in heaven by following that path, or people can be in hell. It's the same reality. The difference is whether you go into a judgmental mindset or whether you go into a compassionate mindset. And those pathways will determine whether you're feeling happy and at peace and productive in your life, or you're feeling like you're always under the whip.
Yeah, it's like the way you think things should be is reality, so that's exactly right. People can be thinking in a very pessimistic, negative way, and that's going to be reality for them, versus someone who's thinking in a very positive way and, more grateful and content, I should say, because you can't have one without the other, then life's going to be looking a lot sort of brighter.
Yeah, and for people that are thinking, oh, look, he's talking about being all hippie guru and, all huggy and burning incense. I'm not. I'm talking about what do you genuinely hold against yourself that you haven't resolved, and learning how to do practices that are ancient, like go back in martial arts schools. They taught practices that open up parts of us to get those attributes. Because if you're going to fight, you need courage. And if you're going to live a successful life, you want to have the attributes of of courage and compassion, because we're all fallible, we all make mistakes. But if you don't have those attributes, you're always going to slip into judgment. And so to learn that training and to go down that journey, I believe is one of the most important journeys you'll ever take. And the reward is just incredible return on investment for what you do.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
I think that would be the most important realization that most individuals need to look at, so that they can be a happy, productive, celebrated human being instead of a self-deprivating, negative, wounded human being that takes it out on other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And themselves the most.
Yeah.
And you don't have to change your reality. You just need to change the pathway you take.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It's a good point there. So with I guess inner performance, and I know you're getting very busy with your life and doing a lot of individual sessions. You're going in the corporate world. You've done a session with us as well, and I think like this methodology is so underutilized, but also so powerful.
Yeah.
What's the sort of plan for you over the next 1 to 3 years in what you're doing?
Well, we've developed a team, and so we're looking at expanding into, more and more businesses into the national level, and also going online and doing, because I've got international clients, so developing some of the international online workshops. And for me personally, getting more, exposure in doing more public speaking, doing more training, networking, those sorts of things. So building the business.
Yep.
And personally, taking my girlfriend to Indonesia and doing some surfing over there with her.
Very
I'm really
good.
looking forward to.
She can take the photos on the sand, and you're surfing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And she's learning to surf too,
Oh,
which
great.
is awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome being able to help her find the joy that surfing's given to me. So doing a bit of few trips with her, and going to Japan skiing in January, which will be
awesome.
a highlight. And so looking forward to that.
Yeah, great.
So all those things I'm very excited about.
That's sort of as a segue into my sort of next question is, you sort of teach and sort of give people the blueprint of how to live a sustainable life, but what sort of makes you tick? What are the things you do? Obviously, including surfing and having that as a release. What's the sort of sustainable outlook? What's a normal week look like for you outside of your practices?
Well, I think, you've hit the nail on the head. Surfing for me is not only just exercise, it's fun.
It's fun, yeah.
And to be able to connect with a community of like-minded souls, even though we're bobbing around the water, is my pub. So I love
even just going for a paddle, even if it's small. It's just
the ocean is my church. It's my sanctuary. I just feel so good.
You just switch off from reality as well.
Yeah.
I totally relate to that.
And meditation practice can be formal or informal. The informal is just being with the ocean and looking out to sea and being just still, looking at the sun shimmering on the horizon, or just being in nature is a lovely thing for me. It's very strongly connected to me. It helps balance me. It brings about a sense of joy. It rejuvenates me. I do like fishing when I can.
Yeah, I love fishing.
And the bonus with fishing, I like cooking. Yeah. So I love to get friends together when I've got fresh fish. Yeah. So that's a real happiness plug for me. And there's something else I do. Coming out of COVID, we all lost our social life, and I was thinking, there's a bunch of people I really want to catch up with, but trying to see them all is like trying to herd cats.
Oh, seriously, yeah.
It's just ridiculous. So I came up with this idea of let's put everyone together. Yeah. Into one place. They don't know each other. Some of them know or they've heard. So I invited all my friends. It took 3 months together, and we had this massive sort of event where there was 20 people in a room, and we all had drinks and food, and we went out dancing. It was the best night. Yeah. And people all wanted their numbers. It was quite funny, and said, "Oh, we'll start a WhatsApp group." And I thought, well, what'll I call it? And then I thought, well, they're all the people I chose, so I'll call it the chosen ones.
Yeah, that's funny.
So now we get together a couple of times a year, all those people.
Yeah, I love that.
And that's sort of my social sort of big fix.
Yeah.
I don't go to pubs or clubs or do all that. But getting together with those group of people is just so awesome. And they're all very connected to my heart, and we share so much together, and a lot of them naturally are very successful people in their own right.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love being able to connect with that tribe a few times a year, but do it really well. And the rest of the time I'm happy to be on my own.
Yeah, you need that human interaction. I think that's important, but you also need the ability to be able to be present and be comfortable with yourself and recharge. Like I'm great at being able to spend time on my own and recharge through the week, and just work through my sort of schedule, and then having that social sort of human interaction as well. And it's funny, you're sort of at a different stage of life, but I'm starting to see that it is becoming harder to catch up with my friends that now have kids, and I'm not there yet, so I'm having to go down and coordinate and see, and you got to go out of your way. Like if you're not putting the work in to continue to form those relationships. And I remember my father always said, as you get older, your sort of network from a friend's point of view does decrease naturally, because life gets busy, people drift off, everyone goes on their own journey, which is natural. But you got to spend time in doing things like that and organising it. And I always feel like there's only a few in a group that do that. You got to be able to herd the cow sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. If you don't put the attention and love into things, they just die.
Yeah, they do.
And it's one of those social simple initiatives I've ever done in my life that's been so rewarding, and everyone really looks forward to the next one.
Yeah.
And everyone knew that when they come into the room, they were going to meet some awesome people.
Yeah.
And they've all become friends, which is great. So it's like my little private club.
There's a cool documentary. I don't know if you've seen it, and I think it's called Blue Zones or something. It's around studying centurions, so people who different areas around the world with more concentration of people living over 100. And the main takeaways, I think there was one in Japan, Sardinia I think was another one. There was a few others I can't remember. But the main ones were a sense of connection with community, and they did stuff like that when they got really old and they sort of didn't really have many people around them. I can imagine when you're 100, there's not a lot of friends left. So they had these communities in these areas they're living. Natural produce as well was a big one, so they're not eating processed food. And they usually lived in areas where they had to move around a lot on their feet. Like hilly villages.
Yes.
So they're walking high elevation. So they were the three main takeaways. There's a few others there, but it's key to life, and it's key to living a long life.
And I think that's that idea of having loving relationships has been proven in many studies. That Harvard study, that 75-year study that's touted a lot, where they followed 20-year-olds through their life, what makes you happy. They started off, it was all money and fame, and over a period of time in their 70s, they all said the same thing. It's the quality of loving relationships. Now, for people, they don't need to be all weird about it, but if you have that relationship where you can share love and receive love, and it's such an uplifting thing. And, whether it's those people in those studies, they had loving communities. In a study done in Roseto, where the Italian community lived way beyond the health statistics of Americans, and they smoked cigars and didn't do anything particularly different. It was because they lived in an Italian community where they all greeted each other and had that love and support. So this is like a no-brainer. And the problem is the digital era is doing the opposite.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to
Disconnect.
anyone. Disconnect. I'll send them a text or like something. I don't want to actually go over there and actually say, hi, how you going, and connect with them. So I think, hopefully these studies and this wisdom percolates back around in communities, and we all take it up and have your little version of what I do and connect with your people, because it's really important.
Yeah.
And they're healthy people, not just anyone, not, people in your life that aren't healthy for you. They're your chosen ones.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it doesn't matter whether it's 1 or it's 5 or 10. It's not a number. It's the quality. And I think you're right, Blake. It's really critical to make it work whichever way you can do it. And you feel it. You feel after those interactions, you feel high. You feel loved. You feel positive, and that's a natural, great thing to inject into your system. And I mean, everyone's the blacksmith of their happiness.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you don't create it and take the research or the wisdom and cultivate it, it's not going to happen.
No, not at all. My last question, I tend to ask this towards the end, and it's interesting hearing people's answers. If you could put yourself in your position of being 18 again, what would you say to yourself?
I thought about this for a while, and I think the main thing I would say to my 18-year-old self is that it's okay you don't know all the answers.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
Yeah.
And to back yourself and back your instincts. If it feels right, follow it. If it doesn't feel right, don't. Because you're much more wiser than you give yourself credit for.
Yeah, great answer. Love it. Well, mate, appreciate your time. It's been, phenomenal, getting to know you, now being a friend and sort of working with you both on a personal and professional level, and the impact you're doing, in people's lives is obviously truly incredible. So I look forward to seeing the future journey that you hold.
Great. Thanks so much, Blake. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.